Astral projection, interstellar travel, and the Andromeda Paradox. First, I will briefly explain the present situation on interstellar travel by spaceship. We would all like a NASA warp drive project that could take a spacecraft to Alpha Centauri in 2 weeks, right now. And why not? Here's how it stands. I have given a decent enough reference list and a printed summary which hopefully should assist you. So watch and listen. The means to produce astral projection and some of the problems with building Alcubierre warp drive starships have now been solved as we described here. As of March 10th this year, NASA confirmed that warp drive or any other term for faster than light travel still remains at the level of speculation. At the same time, they refer people to a site called the Tau Zero Foundation, which suggests some future possible ways. My immediate feeling on this matter is that I am yet again reminded of my days with General Motors by Alfred P. Sloan, in particular the section on the copper-cooled car, in which one can certainly see management ghosts from the past. In the present circumstances, this could best amount to setting up an organization, in this case Tau Zero Foundation, to consider the matter, so as to get it off NASA's back and then to look for useful spin-off from the foundation. Tau Zero Foundation includes a cost zero option which you can use if you choose. In fact, the Tau Zero Foundation began with the Breakthrough Propulsion Physics program, which actually was funded through NASA, but the Tau Zero Foundation is not now affiliated with NASA. Current proposals by founder Mark Mills are here. And of course, the so-called warp drives of Alcubierre drives are very much on the table. And here's current idea as to how it may work. Allegedly, therefore, the NASA warp drive project could take the spacecraft to Alpha Centauri in 2 weeks, according to Lockheed Martin anyway. Clearly, there are still quite a few problems in such a situation. Some are mentioned in the wiki, and I am now going to mention what could be the worst problem, a total nightmare. A problem solved. If the worst problem can be dealt with though, we may be able to fiddle it all together to sort out the rest. I have solved the worst problem, but still have some technical details to make the work seem even better. Well, consider the Andromeda Paradox. The MBI deals with it forthwith in reference 10 and also in references 13 to 16 and 18. In the MBI, special relativity does not tell us all we need to know about simultaneity. We have shown the comedy of philosophical errors as pointed out by others, including for example by Nahin in the American Institute of Physics, involving tolerably well-known names like Putnam, Reggic, Harris, Pick, Sklar, Stein, Fitzgerald, Weingard, Ehrman, Godfrey, Smith, and Smart. What a bunch of fascist monkeys. I will try to explain why fascist later in the presentation. In case the reason is not obvious, okay, so I am smarter than all those guys. Indeed, Roger Penrose gives an example of the Andromeda Paradox as shown on Wikipedia. The chosen case shows a car driven when on Monday in Cambridge, UK. Some army in Andromeda is lining up on parade, but on Tuesday, the Andromedan attack is well on the way. Even funnier cases can be described using a person walking slowly along a street as compared to someone else walking along the same street in the opposite direction at the same time. Hard to understand what would happen to Morvan as well. For this well-known Andromeda Paradox, we note Caspar Hare's paper. We clearly take the option suggested by Hare that special relativity does not tell us all we need to know about simultaneity. thus avoiding any direct conflict with the Andromeda Paradox whatsoever. So in the NBI, there should be no problem with the Andromeda Paradox. There certainly does not seem to be any problem. As Hare points out, denial that special relativity is a complete description is an option that can even be taken by Hare's tense realists as well, as it happens. Of course, tense realism is in some ways quite close to our position of perspectival realism, which refers also to things of which one is not perceptually aware, such as indeed a possible future invasion by Andromeda, to use the Andromeda Paradox example. Well, we claim we have accounted for the paradox. There now is, maybe, the brute fact of what happens to us if we do encounter the results of the paradox, perhaps in a warp-drive spaceship heading to Andromeda. Oh, I do not think so. We have to remember that, at best, the B series, the one inevitably most used by most physicists, is really a very partial model. Its sole use has implications of modernism of the worst kind, that we are simply machines whose future course is precisely predictable, and are Hitlerite in their extremity. I am not a machine, I am a person. To help to explain that fact, I have to resort to the pioneering work of others such as Leher, or still better to the MBI. I have to consider my position in the A series as already defined. Magda Osman's approach may help us to proceed immediately and clearly. There are other inviting avenues of approach to reach useful results. Magda Osman points out that there is a limited reliable evidence that we have a separate conscious and unconscious mind. Perhaps, as explained already in work on such matters as Mary's room, there is no reliable evidence whatsoever that the mind is the brain. So we have much to learn. However, in her quite important paper referred to above, she explains how her views do not allow Leibotz's work to undermine the work on agency and control. Papers 24 to 26 allow us much more detail on the matter. We are able to reach our goals by learning to associate planned actions with intended outcomes. Accurate representations of the future will depend on the accuracy of causal representations. They support the planned actions needed to achieve a future goal. One prediction to come from this framework would be that the more people unpack their causal belief and the consequences of their actions in achieving future goals, the higher their judgment of likelihood will be achieving the goals in the future, which is also in line with Tversky and Kohlheer's 1994 support theory. Osman certainly does not seem to dispense with the unconscious mind altogether, very useful as since Freud and Jung and even earlier. It has been a most worthwhile model. But many of her ideas certainly agree, as well as earlier considerations can suggest, with my own many bubble interpretation, which will not allow our future and our past to be properly defined as if on a plate. In short, we have choice, and some rather potty theoretical physicist cannot take that from us. By his oversimplified, simplified view of the cosmos. As we have frequently said, we need a McTaggart A series as well as a McTaggart B series. Clearly, Osman questions the empirical foundations for the so-called nudge approach adopted by the UK and US governments. The mechanism behind nudge is likened to subliminal advertising, but when it rarely ever mentioned is the subliminal advertising is a myth, explains Magda Osman. Quite correct, and that understanding goes right back to Phil Miracle and earlier. Osman's own book, Future Minded, is reasonably reviewed by an LSE reviewer. Another reviewer says the UK, US, and the growing list of other international governments want to apply nudge to affect public policy. Certainly, there is no reliable evidence that nudges lead to significant behavioral change. And very interesting long review of Raj Prasad, which explains some of Osman's ideas. All this is rather a pity, as we do not want politics, just fact. And the facts in this case appears to have been simply misunderstood by right-wing governments of the UK and US. If we wish, we can go on using Smith predictors or possibly even better, MPC predictors on consideration of and evaluation of human thought processes. This I will explain later in the paper. Smith predictors, you say. Well, we must remember that there could be something like a so-called tipping point made when we try to do our astral projection or to visit Andromeda in the warp drive spaceship. Just as indeed we may feel we have so-called tipping points in our normal life. So have we got descriptions or mathematics for such ideas? Of course we have, and we are not simply using milligram or watts here, but considering the work of Zeeman. When I speak of Zeeman here, I am not referring to Peter Zeeman 1865 to 1943, who did some important work on spectral lines and quantum theory, but to Chris Zeeman, who invented the catastrophe machine and for this and other work was knighted by Queen Elizabeth of the allegedly glorious nation of England. So here is a picture of this eventually professionally made machine and some of its parts in figure 1. You can make one of these machines at home. I followed Sir Christopher's example as he describes in detail on page 68 of the work. I made it as he suggested using several nails, a piece of wood, a CD and 2 elastic bands. Do the same, it really does work, like he says. The idea can also be shown by bending a playing card as in figure 2 and then pressing in the center. When it reaches the tipping point, the bend reverses itself. Now figures 3 and 4 illustrate the bifurcation and hysteresis curves. To illustrate how visual hysteresis works, use Maggie's figure 5. You can see the hysteresis effect by looking at the letter. A medium to elementary level textbook gives a lot more detail but clearly shows application to a living creature, in this case a dog. Figure 6 illustrates the dog and describes the mathematical mapping. The equivalent figures in reference 37 are figure 2 and figure 4, and brief explanations are given in reference 37. And yes, one can even get quite a lot of detail, as Lewis does for the zebra fish. By applying very modern methods, we can even study time travel in Physarum, polycephalum, as I have done. So, how far can this approach go? Not everyone is totally happy with all the details, but certainly a serious, somewhat similar method is currently being tried with training athletes. This usually includes modern dynamic systems analysis methods as far as possible. The most common approach is inverted U theory, which could readily be improved and incorporated into astral projection. There are two obvious questions. Can we begin to use such techniques as a preparation for interstellar warp drive travel? And can we use it now for astral projection? These two matters may well require somewhat similar patterns of approach. And clearly many more problems could arise if and when non-human intelligent life forms are met. For example, as a vegetarian who follows many Hindu practices, I might have little qualms about dealing with cow-based extraterrestrials, but human meat eaters might easily find themselves being eaten by super cows between two slices of bread. But let us stick with known facts. Whilst there is no case of actual interstellar warp-drive travel, there have been many alleged cases of astral projection over many countries over millennia. I have commented briefly elsewhere in many articles in my blog on the earlier historical work in astral projection, and there is a wiki and a WikiHow. Earliest claims go back thousands of years. The results all seem anecdotal, but this is hardly surprising as we noted above that there is not real understanding of the mind and brain. The best work so far would include my own many bubble interpretation or MBR, Leher's work and a few others. And I certainly think astral projection sounds okay. Science seems rather hung up on the erstwhile hanging judge and lunatic Sir Isaac Newton and his followers. Certainly Newton was all right up to a point for physical objects and right-wing modernism, but unusual for the mind. As noted by Hutchison, ancient scientists were fascinated by the phenomenon of flickering lights. Apuleius experimented in 125 AD with the flickering light produced by the rotation of Potter's wheel, finding that it could reveal a type of epilepsy. Ptolemy studied in 200 AD the phenomenon of the flickering generated by sunlight through the spokes of a spinning wheel. He noted the patterns of colors appear in the eyes of the observer and that a feeling of euphoria could be experienced. In the 20th century, a flicker device which they called the dream machine, with which subjects reported dazzling lights of unearthly brilliance and color, from beautiful geometric images that resemble mandalas. The display might dissolve into individual images and dramatic scenes like brightly colored dreams. Undoubtedly, these people are seeing something, but follow up so far as only seem to produce minor curative measures. The reference below explains in detail how it is done. I can be much cheaper than $50 if you have a few parts and want to experiment. So far, I have noted nothing about to reach astral projection standards, and it can all turn out to be very time wasting. But the literature below should bring you up to date. I did know a prime early figure, William Burroughs, but did not feel openly or unduly impressed. Work on Mary's rule makes it clear that the mind is unlikely to be anywhere near adequately represented by a right-wing modernistic description of the brain and a few other obvious bits and pieces. A B series only model infested with a simple, essentially modernistic, mechanistic model of the brain, often using dubious fMRI conclusions, is clearly not enough. Evan Thompson and many others be almost overcome by it. But I certainly am not. I do not care for the politics, but ham-fisted politicians have created it, so the point is made. My latest little blog, just on Mary's rule, is here, and those who wish to can follow upwards and backwards from here. We can all be aware at least that the ideas of mindfulness and meditation are beginning to penetrate even as far as Mountain View. Stan Grof could have explained all this years ago, as could so many others. So here's a few graphs I did to show how meditation is related to mantras, which we recently devised using nonlinear differential equations through the Berkeley-Madonna equation solving procedures. Yes, meditation is here and astral projection may be next. We use no drugs and a serious consideration of the work of such authors as Carhart Harris and Felcher. For Felcher at least, mainly on ketamine, it seems actually to suggest to me that we neither need to nor should we use such drugs. Google can do the meditation already. Here's the graphs for reference 62. Bear in mind that are currently seeking effects and not detailed accurate results in the same way as the Zeeman machine above was shown to work even in rough circumstances and powered by rubber bands. And that was another reason we showed the Zeeman machine earlier. We can get some detailed results, but we are making the point of proving the effect. Figure 1, brain noise. Figure 2, a little mantra with no brain noise. Figure 3, a little mantra with brain noise which clearly may give some effect. Figure 4, a little mantra with lots of brain noise. Figure 5, decent mantra with lots of brain noise, abscissa changes is the reason for change on left of graph, but a nice result. So now in principle, we can go to Smith predictor or MPC predictor methods. But it is well worth reading the book and seeing the videos of Rosita first. For example, as Rosita explains and clarifies, even in his first introductory videos, detailed formulae should be covered if and when we know exactly why, particularly in strange and new circumstances. Hold hard. We can even contrive to create avatars already, like the film Avatar, sort of. And LARPing is easy. Here's part of LARPing comic strip. 2 frames above show the mock participants, and it is revealed that Simon de Beauvoir has borrowed LARPing space and Frederick Nietzsche's sister. And here's 2 videos showing you how to LARP. You can appreciate that in reputable LARPing, a great deal of care is taken to ensure the actions can lead to no harm. And the ferocious looking sword play is in a picture below using mock swords made of foam rubber. The end result is that we have a willing suspension of disbelief for the purpose of fun and games. Astral projection is sometimes attempted and possibly even done with such the same spirit. Fair enough, and perhaps a good way to establish continued interest. But there is always real danger. For example, people have fallen great heights when their astral projection has failed, whether it has been tried correctly or not. And of course, OBE research contains many cases in virtual reality where people have ducked and even become terrified by attempts to cut off their heads with a circular fan or to have their heads bashed in with a mallet. We need to simplify the situation. In astral projection, there is no need for any unusual or clearly conflicting physical involvement. As far as we know, historically, the outcomes appear to have been immense. We know that Dunsberg and other aviators who have had similar experiences, and even of one allegedly insane aviator whose art once appeared at Tate Modern. We have already pointed out that neither we nor Mutzinger are totally opposed to the idea, and we have both already dealt with the folk phenomenology problem. Interstellar warp drive spaceships are still on the table for consideration later. Having examined the requirements here, some of the problems seem resolvable provided that the A series is considered as well as the B series. I remind you that these are the A and B series originally put forward by JME McTaggart and substantially altered by themselves. What we have discovered can also be used in the meantime to further develop astral projection, a modern version of the OBE. We have now examined the possibilities of OBE. Continually, people claim to have experienced it recently. Just like the first reports of the Wright brothers' aeroplanes, these reports can be regarded as anecdotal. We think Sir Oliver Lodge would have liked to have something like the Yates equation, but he did not have the advantage of the JME Mac Target A series, nor did he have quantum Bayesianism. Even more importantly, he did not have modern methods of psychophysics such as those of Urson and Planck. So what we have done is to prepare the Yates equation. This is obtained by the use of values obtained throughout the literature, and these are measurements and not anecdotal per se. We apply these values to the method like our work on mantras just described. X represents the millisecond time delay in seconds before the subject sees the OBE screen, and T is a probability function, so that T is equal to 1 indicates a certainty that the subject sees the OBE. Rasch testing and other methods concern the result. In simple terms, we simply warbled sinusoidally the likelihood of the high probability as if we were applying a mantra. It is rather like the Caruso effect, as J.J. Gibson might have suggested, and could even act as a training aid for astral projection. The first picture shows a very good position for a simulation of astral ability where the Yates equation is used, and the second shows a poor representation. The jagged upper lines indicate noise and poor or no experience. The smoother upper lines indicate ability. The value to watch in both cases is L1, which sets the heights of noise in the model. In the first case, we have raised L1 high to 2. The second case shows that we can happen even at L1 equals to 0.1. The Zeeman catastrophe machine was shown above to work even in rough circumstances and powered by rubber bands. The point there and here was that we looked only for a rough result to provide a lead. Zeeman showed catastrophe and we showed a way to prove astral projection in physics terms. So just as using mantras gives Google people insight, meditation, etc., so too should my results lead us to astral projection. How do we proceed? By doing more experiments with specially prepared videos with sinusoidal time-lapsing variations in one way. These videos can be altered as we described importantly. The means to produce astral projection and some of the problems with building Alcubierre warp drive starships have now been solved. So, if you wish to carry out astral projection or to know how to build a warp drive starship, you should use this work. All publications are free to read on the internet. Read our blog and read our book. People may not believe that either astral projection or the warp drive are possible. But then, before the Wright brothers, most people did not believe we can even fly in an aeroplane. And in the days of horse-travel cars would have been unthinkable. It is almost certain that you will never be able to build a working warp drive without our methods. Not in 100 years. And people may have been using astral projection for millennia, but not knowing how or exactly what they are doing. Do not believe politicians and paid scientists who tell you that your minds are not free and you have to do what they say. Your minds are free, but they do not want you to know it. Malcolm X reasonably said, our objective is complete freedom, justice and equality by any means necessary. I say your minds are free now. Use them. Thank you for listening. I gave this talk for Dr. John Yates on behalf of the Institute of Fundamental Studies, Goa. The transcript will be on the URL labeled current at the start of the video and the source of transcript given at the end of this video.